welcome to Conspirinormal, everybody. It's Adam flying solo tonight, but I've got with me really cool guests to start off, really, I guess, officially to start off the 400s, episode 401 here. So Jason Andrews, who is a fellow podcaster. He is the host and producer and jack of all trades of the Paranormal Patio podcast. And we've met Jason a couple of times. He came down to Nashville for the Strange Realities conference back in October. And then Serfiel and I met him in Somerset back in January when we went up there for the Penny Royal party. So we decided we go ahead and get Jason on the show, and here he is. Jason, welcome to Conspirinormal, brother.
Thanks, man. Pleasure to be here. Absolute pleasure. Yeah, I had a lot of cool meetups in the last 6 months.
Yeah. It was great to meet you at the Strange Realities conference for sure, and to hang out for just a little bit. I was, so absolutely just busy that I didn't really have a lot of time to really hang out, but made a little bit of time when I had to take Ren back and forth to the hotel. So I was able to hang out with you guys for a little bit, but the Penny Royal guys, really good friends of ours as well. And of course, Serfiel is featured in quite a few episodes of this second season. Of course, Nathan did like one interview with him and made split it into like 5 different episodes. Yeah. So we, Somerset not being too far from where we are in Nashville, we just decided to go up there, and of course that's where we got to know you a little bit better. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man.
I've been listening to the show, listened to most of the third season, and
here we go.
Yeah. Oh no, it's good. I mean, you got a good little thing going on there. You like to have fun with your guests and all that, and I'm curious what kind of got you, and I'm sure this will lead to a wider discussion, but I'm curious what got you started with the Paranormal Patio, what got you interested in all this weirdness to begin with.
Sure. Well, I would say that working at my local radio station in 2010 or so really got me keen on speaking to the invisible public. It's a lot easier to do podcasting if you have any type of public speaking experience. And I've always been a pretty strong public speaker. I don't usually get nervous. Radio was a lot of fun. Whenever my son was born, I quit working at the radio station because it pays beans, and probably even less now. And when podcasting was really taking off, even before then, I did a live radio show on the internet with a friend of mine. It only did 3 or 4 episodes and we stopped. I started another podcast in 2014 or something like that. And with my friend John, who started Paranormal Patio with me, and another friend of ours. We got kind of bored with it. And whenever the pandemic hit, I asked John if he would want to come back and just talk weird stuff. And I didn't know what it was going to turn into. But it's taken over pretty much all my free time now. So here I am at the Paranormal Patio.
Yeah, we never know exactly how these things are going to go whenever we start them, right? That's
yeah. You're 400 deep, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah. It's it definitely has been a journey for me, and in the last 10 years that I've been doing this, that and the conferences and everything. So yeah, you never know exactly how it starts. Yeah, you do. I did notice that. I'm glad you said about the radio thing, because I did notice that you seem to have some radio training. Now that you mentioned,
I don't know if I'd call it training, Adam. I don't know that I'd call it training. It was here's how to use the reel to reel that I was
Yeah.
still responsible for using. Here's how to use the carts, and here's the soundboard. Knock yourself out. List of
Right.
songs you can't play, so don't do that.
Right. Well, did you actually go on the radio? Did you actually DJ and
Oh
stuff?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, you got a little bit of that. You got a little bit of that timbre to your voice, sir. So
I appreciate it. Man.
That's the where I'm going with that. So what got you started on all looking at all the weirdness? How did that start for you? Has this been like a lifelong thing? Did you just recently get into it? Like how did all this start?
Well, I'm a member of what I call the Ghostbuster generation. Like I was born in '85, and I've never known a world without Ghostbusters. And I was huge into the cartoon whenever I was a little kid. The toys and the little backpack and everything. Like I was all in. We had some really good horror and sci-fi that came out from the time I was born until I exited my formative years, and I was always into weird stuff just because of that. I think I dipped in and out. I'd be really into something, and then it would fizzle out, and I'd just get sucked back into regular life like everybody else kind of does. When Hellier came out, and I finally gave in and watched it. I put it off for so long because it had hell in it, and I thought it was going to be like some weird Christian Amazon documentary, right? But it captured that sense of adventure that I think a lot of paranormal TV is missing, and what seems like pretty blatantly obvious honesty. They don't find something extravagant at the end of each episode. You know what I mean? It's real.
Yeah.
And that really got me sucked back into the paranormal really hard with a mature sort of mindset that I have now versus whenever I was younger. And so, yeah, I've really embraced it, and I've learned a lot, read a lot of books, met a lot of great people, yourself included. And I'm happy with where I am in it.
Do you find that Hellier is a watershed for paranormal, I guess, programming? I won't necessarily say television, but programming. Because it seems like this. I was having this discussion with Surfiel the other day, and for me personally, and what kind of got me sucked back into the paranormal, I guess you could say. I mean, I'd always been interested in it, but really I was more interested in UFOs and that whole mythology back in the late 90s, when more than I was interested in ghosts or the paranormal or anything like that, although that had always been something for me that was always there. But really, like, the first season of Ghost Hunters, and probably the second season as well, was a big influence on me. And I remember that being like really huge for me to see on TV. And it was the same kind of thing. I mean, at that point, they weren't really, they would just go to these investigations, and they would have they would necessarily wouldn't always find something, or they would find a mundane reason why it could be that way, and it wasn't all sensational in that first season. And that first season was a pretty big success, and I can remember just eating all that stuff up around that time and really getting into, although I never really considered myself a ghost hunter, that's really what got me into trying to find more radio shows about the paranormal and these things, and kind of got me started on my path. So do you find that Hellier, for a lot of people, has brought that out in them now, since I guess the first season came out in 2019?
Well, I think it's undeniable the amount of people that it's reached, and the amount of, this is so cheesy, the amount of lives that it's changed. Like it's cliche to say, and it's really corny, but like it totally changed my entire life. I know that pre-Hellier, I wasn't sitting here talking, to other weirdos about weirdo stuff. You know what I mean? Like I was just a dude. And so I know I'm not alone. Their following is humongous. And you look at that without like a national cable TV, like driving force behind it. Sure. Like Amazon is huge and YouTube is huge. It's hard to base things that are exclusive to streaming still for us in the general public. We don't know how many people watch it. You know what I mean? But the cable ratings, you can look and say, well, there's 1.8 million people watch this. So I don't know. I definitely think it definitely motivates a lot of people to at least try something or read something, listen to something. It definitely has me for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just I guess the point of view, I do see that it does have quite a popular following, and I mean, I guess definitely kudos to them for doing what they've done. But I think it also, it's at the same time, it's launched people like yourself to study your own ideas and go on your own journey, which is similar to how it went for me. I don't buy a lot of the stuff anymore that I used to buy into, because I've gone, I mean, I guess in a lot of basic ways, maybe I do, but I just look at things a little more complex now. So I think that, I guess it's the gateway drug, I suppose, is how you could call it for maybe you guys.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
That's a good terminology for it.
Right. And through that, you well, I mean, I guess we both through the same thing. I mean, Nathan, and found out that they were doing Pennyroyal podcasts and all that. And of course, we all found out about Nathan. How could you miss him in that episode?
Yeah, for sure.
But and to find out he's just like that in real life is amazing. But
he doesn't stop. He's like a robot.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, he is something else. But you connected up with the Pennyroyal guys as well, and you've actually become quite tight with them. Talk a little bit about your relationship with them.
Sure. Well, to back up a little bit, when I watched Hellier season 2 and saw Lonnie Scott on the show, the hypnotist, on the screen during that alien abduction thing that they did, it said Mattoon, Illinois. Well, that's like 45 minutes from me. I'm like, really? This is interesting. And so I just looked him up, see if he was online, and he was. And we chatted for a little bit, and I ended up doing the graphic design for his web store. Like, he just made a post one day looking for somebody to do this t-shirt, whatever. So I've done all of his t-shirts and stuff since then. And he made a post one day when the pandemic started about, like, if you have any creative aspirations, now's a really great time to do it and, act out on them. And that's when I started the podcast. So flash forward from April of 2020 to right when Pennyroyal dropped, I get an email from Nathan. Hey, I'm just reaching out to see if you'd be interested in having us on your show to promote Pennyroyal that just came out. And he gave me a description. Like, I've already listened to the whole thing. He doesn't know this, like, I was already a fan anyway. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to have you guys on the show. So we set it up, and they were the first episode of season 2. And I had to ask about my weird excuse, because in the end of Pennyroyal season 1, there's a throwaway line about Aleister Crowley visiting Livingston County, Kentucky. So I had to know more about it. And because of that, we had like a 3-hour conversation off camera. And we dug into a bunch of weird stuff in Western Kentucky, and we've just been in pretty much constant contact since then. I've been down there to see them a couple times, saw them in Nashville at Strange Realities. And I'm always talking to somebody about it. But yeah, they're great guys. All of them super smart guys. And just the nicest people, man. Everybody that I've met in Somerset has just been top-notch nice.
Yeah, it's a nice little town. It's an interesting place. And of course, we hung out at the Jarfly there, which really I kind of liken it to kind of like the center of town. Really, there's a lot that goes on in that little area. But there's a nice little like artistic community down there as well, and it is all kind of like revolves around Dan Dutton and what he brings to that community is pretty priceless. But I guess that it's just this little artistic mecca in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky.
It really is. It really is.
I mean, and you know, and we got to what was really special the next day, on that Sunday morning, we actually got to go and uh to Dandyland and see his studio and see some of his artwork, and that was really special. That was a really special treat. So yeah, he is an amazingly talented and gifted artist. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, for sure. And a super nice guy, super nice,
Oh
down to
yeah,
earth
yeah,
guy.
yeah, very much so. He approached myself and Surfiel and just started talking to us about the show and everything. And I think we're going to probably at some point we'll have him on to talk about some things. And he actually gave me a book about the child ballads,
Yeah.
the series of paintings that he has done, which are, he has a couple of those that are there on site, and pretty amazing stuff. I think if anybody had the opportunity to really, he's very much a man of the land too. Like, I mean, his family goes back in that area for generations and generations. So truly special.
Yeah.
But I guess through all this, I guess you're beginning with Hellier and your association with the Penny Royal guys and all that. You've really started to, I guess, have your own experiences and do your own thing.
Mhm.
So let's talk about some of the weird synchronicities that, Jason, that you've experienced, and we can start just talking about other things as well. But I want to know about some of that.
Just specifically synchronistic things, or just weird things that have happened since then? Okay, so
yeah, well, I mean, weird synchronicities are weird anyway, but yeah, I mean, are just weirdness, that's happened to you since then. Like, do you feel, I guess the thing is, do you feel like this has opened a door for you in a lot of ways?
Absolutely, 100%. I think a lot of the synchronicities initially were really focused on what has become a documentary project that I've been working on for over a year. The initial synchronicity of watching Hellier, hearing about Etidorpha, reading the first 2 chapters online, and then Greg Newkirk on Patreon posted like pictures and information about the copy of the book that they have, and they post the map that I hadn't gotten to yet. And when I see the town where my really weird lucid dream experience had taken place on that map, and I had no idea that's where the story was going with Etidorpha, that really definitely made the whole event stick out in my mind. It totally changed my entire scope of understanding of what synchronicity meant, because it hit me so hard that I had never had anything really that strange happen. I would go on to say that the things that Nathan and I uncovered together about Western Kentucky in our research, a lot of those were very synchronistic. The next day after I interviewed them for Paranormal Patio, I come across this post on Twitter, and it's about the Goat Man of Livingston County, Kentucky. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. So I reached out to the poster, and then I reached out to Nathan. I was like, hey, I think I found something on Livingston County. He just said, me too. And I was like, what'd you find? And I could see he's typing and I'm typing, and we both like found the same thing at the exact same time, and had a good laugh about that, about the weirdness of everything just being totally literally in sync that time. I've had several smaller ones. Finding out that my birthday is the same day as William Morgan's birthday, and William Morgan being the sort of pre-regurgitated version of the I Am the Man and Etidorpha, which was pretty crazy. After I found that out just last week, actually. And
yeah, we'll get a little bit more into that soon, but yeah,
sure. Yeah, I don't know. There's been a lot of synchronicities. And then because of Hellier and following that crew around, I started studying Thelema under Marco Visconti for, I don't know, about a year or so. It's not really my cup of tea, but I was interested in just researching it and studying it more than practicing it. But it did open up a lot of those weird synchronistic sort of magical things for me. So even though I'm not openly practicing it, I think it's opened up doorways to me to be able to sort of project manifestation into the world, and it's changed my magical practice for sure.
And you had a weird experience that you detailed on your latest episode, actually. And what was that?
Yeah,
This is more
so
supernatural, I guess,
it's definitely weirdo stuff.
and a little synchronistic as well.
So there is, for the longest time, actually, where I live, I thought there was absolutely nothing weird here because no one talks about this stuff. We're very conservative, very right-wing group of people. I stand out as a complete opposite in both of those. But this is like a 1970s vibe in my entire part of the state. No one talks about this stuff. And when someone does have something weird happen, they either tell one person or they tell no one. So there's no stories about it really. But my friend Keith, who has had several strange occurrences in his life, including a really fun and funny and terrifying Bigfoot encounter, which I talked about with him in episode 1 of season 3. He tells me, hey, there's this cemetery that's not far from where I had this Bigfoot encounter. And it's a really old cemetery. There's some Civil War graves there. There's also these floating lights, and I've seen them and they're real. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. So I'm thinking this is a weird spot that it's like a window area. There's a haunted cemetery with free floating balls of light, and there's, it's a Bigfoot area. And so we went out in August and saw a UFO while I was there, saw one of the balls of light while I was there, heard some really big unexplainable noises between the cemetery and the river, which is less than a mile away in the woods between. And so I'm thinking it's like the unification theory, that I know Cutchin is really big on this. Josh Cutchin's huge on this. Like everything is kind of just a different aspect of the same thing. And I'm working on expanding on that theory a little bit. I don't know where that's going, but it's in process as well with all the other things I'm working on. But I went back last month and took one of my friends and his daughter out there with me, and we were doing some just general investigation, really short. We were only there for maybe 40 minutes. It was for a live stream for my Patreon. And we heard this growl like 3 minutes after we got there, or howl more so, really short. I looked at my friend Levi and I said, what was that? And he says, I don't know, I think it might have been a coyote. And so I made a mental note, like, I got to check the audio recorder on this whenever I get home. We heard a couple of other noises while we were there, but really kind of left feeling like nothing had happened. And I get back and finish the live stream up, and I plug in the audio recorder, pull the file out, and I'm listening to it. And where we heard the howl, there's someone whistling. And I included that in the last episode so that you could go and listen to it. It's very weird. The whistling comes back again later. And then there's an unexplained expression of my name by a woman or child that really gave me the chilly willies a little bit. I was super paranoid because I'm out here in the dark in my studio, and I look out my window of my studio door, which is just to my right, and I saw something about 4 feet tall, looked like a person, but was grayscale, just ran across in front of my neighbor's garage, which is in perfect line of sight. And I was like, all right, I'm done. Like, my brain is messing with me at this point, and I'm just going to go inside. I'll come back tomorrow. So I come back out the next night, and I'm going through the audio, cleaning it up, isolating it, because I know I'm going to use it for the podcast episode. And I go out whenever I'm done. I'm locking my door from the outside in the studio, and I hear a whistle. And I've just been listening to this damn whistle on the audio recorder for, half an hour.
Wow.
And I'm like, all right, that's weird. So it whistles again. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to whistle back. And I'm looking around my whole neighborhood. There's nobody outside. It's early in the morning or super late at night. And it whistles back at me again. So I go to my garage, and I'm like a little freaking out a little bit. And I'm like, I'm going to have a cigarette because I'm freaking out. So I'm standing in my garage, and I'm looking out the back door of my garage, and I hear it another time. This is like the fifth time. But I totally embraced it at this point. Like I'm all in. I whistled with that thing for like 15 minutes and it would whistle back. It didn't copy me. It was not the same every time. But we whistled at each other for a while. And finally I was like, that initial shock had worn off. You know, you kind of get bored even with the super strange at some point. It's like when you sit and watch a UFO for 45 minutes, you know. And so I whistled and I told it good night and I went inside and haven't had anything since. But it's definitely weird.
Yeah, that's definitely weird. That's not something that's ever happened to me. I can tell you that. Very strange.
When it initially happened, I was hoping it wasn't happening to me. I was really hoping I was having a stroke or something. But
yeah, but you were communicating with something. I mean, how far did it seem like it was? Are there like woods around your house? Was it something that was?
There is a woods, but I was getting this whistle initially from the northeast and then from the southeast. It changed where it was based on where I was. So when I left my studio, it was to the northeast where it's pretty open. There's a backhoe and excavation company has a storage garage back there. It's pretty open there. It sounded like maybe 100 yards away if it was loud, or, you know, like 50, 60 yards away if it wasn't loud, if it was just like a person whistling. It gave me the impression that it was farther away and louder, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Never saw anything when it was whistling at me, so I don't know.
So the same whistle that you heard on the recording, the same type of whistle, I guess, was what you were hearing coming from somewhere in the distance.
Yeah. It's like a whimsical, like it could be a song, it could be a little tune.
Right.
But you can't place what it is.
Yeah. And you when you guys actually were there, right, at the site, this was a graveyard, correct? This was like
yeah.
And you were playing some, like, I guess period music, I suppose, was what you were doing.
Yeah, it was a Civil War song, Hell on the Wabash, which we only played because we're near the Wabash River. So
was that because it was a Civil War cemetery, or was that just because it was from the time? Or,
well, the first time when I went out there with my friend Keith, it was his idea to play like a Civil War song. He's like, you should totally just play Hell on the Wabash on your phone. And I was like, okay, yeah, no problem. When I played it, that's when we saw the UFO. So whenever I went back with Levi last month, I was just like, yeah, we should just play it. You know, it worked last time, something weird happened, so maybe something weird will happen this time. And you know, it could have been whistling what it heard, you know, I don't know. It's hard to tell because it's, you know, it's on an audio recorder and we're walking in the snow, you know, but we didn't hear the whistling at all while we were there. It was only on the recorder.
Now, your friend Keith, you said that he had a really odd Bigfoot experience. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because this is interesting for sure.
Yeah, his Bigfoot story I had heard once before at a party. And I really thought, well, Keith is probably just drunk and telling this crazy story. But whenever he retold it for my show, it was exactly the same. And he was stone cold sober. So I don't want to go through the whole thing, but he's camping. They're here in Wood Knox on like a 3-day camping trip on the first night or the second night. Then they're hearing a sort of a howl sound. But he gets up on the third night to use the bathroom in the middle of the night, and he comes back and through the light of a dying fire sees this Bigfoot standing across from him in the wood line. And it begins this harrowing, like, hour-long encounter of him hiding in his tent and touching toes with Bigfoot through the tent. And then he hears a baby Bigfoot, and he thinks that this is like a parent Bigfoot teaching a child how to like forage, because they raided the campsite. And so the last visual Keith has is the baby Bigfoot running out of the wood line, climbing up on the shoulder and back of the large Bigfoot, carrying a bag of Doritos that he had stolen from their cooler. They
Uh-huh.
took all the food that they had outside except for the Quaker Oats rice cakes. They didn't want those, but they took everything else.
And this is Southern Illinois, right? This is was
It's like
where was he?
Central Illinois.
Central Illinois. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I like to point out is that, when we think about Bigfoot, what do we think about? We think about like the Pacific Northwest,
Yeah.
some very remote area. I mean, Central Illinois is not, I mean, there's towns all over the place. There's human habitation everywhere. So, uh, for Bigfoot to be there always seems to be something more going on, but it's got that. It's definitely, I listened to the show, I listened to the episode and him relaying it, and the story definitely has this high weirdness factor, even down to, like you just said, the baby with the bag of Doritos,
And it's weird too that they had a random guy and his kids show up at the beginning of this camping trip that they didn't know. They let him camp with them, and he starts cutting down trees as soon as he gets there. Like, made no sense. It's one of those really weird things. He's never seen this guy since then. Has no idea who he was.
Right?
It's really weird.
Right, and that almost, like, you think that it almost has no bearing on it, but in some way maybe it does, weirdly enough.
Yeah, it's like the randomness factor just rolled the dice, and like you're getting Bigfoot and Chainsaw Guy. Yeah.
Although shout out to Strange Familiars, was the Chainsaw Guy wearing flannel?
I have no idea.
You should ask him.
I need to ask. I'm going to ask him.
You should ask him.
I doubt it, because it was summer. It was really hot.
Well, you never know. Flannel man wears flannel all year round. So
I'll find out.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about this documentary that you're going to do, that you're working on. And what is this called? And what is this about?
So the documentary is called Surface, Before Me, My Altar. It's about my research and investigation into the Etidorpha story that is spun off of a lucid dream encounter that I had in 2001. I had this lucid dream. My girlfriend and I were flying around Southern Illinois, the Shawnee Forest, which is my favorite place on earth, and not unusual for me to dream about being there. We flew over the river and landed in front of this house, which was a really big, nice house that didn't seem to be that it should exist where it was. So the rest of the buildings around it were, a little bit run down, to be nice about it. And we walked up to the bank of the river, and there were all these dead gar on the bank of the river. And I woke up and I thought, that's really weird. Not super strange really, but it's weird that I had such a vivid lucid dream and these gar were there and in this house. 2 years later, my friends and I are not camping. We're just hiking around in Shawnee Forest. Yeah. For the day, we took a big day trip, and we were running out of things to do. And I remembered one time I had been to the Smithland Lock and Dam, and there's a visitor center. So we decided to just go do that because we didn't want to go home. We get there, the road is gone. It's either being redone or removed. There's no way to get to this visitor center. It probably doesn't even exist anymore. The dam is obviously still there. So it's called the Smithland Lock and we don't know anything. We're just teenagers. We're stupid. Obviously, Smithland, Kentucky on the atlas seems like it might be a good vantage point. So we double back and go through Kentucky for what seems like an hour, but it wasn't. It was only probably 25, 30 minutes. And we pull up to this town, Smithland, Kentucky. We turn. I'm not even driving. I'm in the back seat. We turn off this side road and we park, and I get out and I look up, and it's the same house that I had this lucid dream experience about 2 years ago. And we walk up to the bank of the river, watching a barge come through, and one of my friends says, "Hey, come up here and look at this." So we walk up, and there's all these dead gar on the riverbank, just like I had dreamed.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so I'm freaking out at this point. I didn't even tell them about it until a couple weeks ago. that I had that happen, because it was just so strange. This was not in my depth at that time. Now if that happened to me, I would be all in. But at the time, I was just freaked out. And so it's in my head. This is 2004 ish. What am I going to do with that? Nothing. It's just a strange experience that I had. But I mentioned earlier, coming across Etidorpha, and it brings up Smithland, Kentucky. And I thought, this is just bizarre, because this is a little town that no one has any business knowing exists. There's nothing there, really super interesting. Why is it in this book? So I had to finish the book, and I have a couple of times, I think. And yeah, so I was like, this Etidorpha book is really interesting. And I started doing research on it, and I decided that I would try to find this cave entrance in Kentucky where I Am the Man, self-titled, enters the hollow earth and learns the secrets of the universe. And so I set out to do that, man. And I don't know how I really feel about it. Obviously, it's hard to just come out and say, I think that the earth is hollow, and this guy went there and he came back and he told this story and it's now a book. It's really hard for me, even me, who's into really weird stuff, be like, yeah, that's definitely true. But at the same time, there's so much truth. It's so brilliantly interwoven. If the narrative of the book is made up, there's so much in there that's real that it really makes me wonder, maybe something did happen. Maybe this guy really did have some sort of experience. Did he really go to the hollow earth, or was it some sort of, mental projection similar to non-physical UFO abductions? Maybe it's something like that, or these fairy encounters where obviously someone's not just disappearing from Earth and go into fairyland. Like, there's got to be some sort of non-physical aspect to these encounters with high strangeness. And maybe this is one of them, or maybe it's all bullshit and it's just made up and it was a best-selling book in 1895. But either way, it's really interesting. And the things that I found in my research, I think, are super interesting.
Well, we could talk about that, but I want to talk about Etidorpha just a little bit. This book, what is, you mentioned a little, but what is it about? What's its history?
Sure.
You've read it a couple of times. What are your I look at the book of knowledge here, the Wikipedia article about it. There's not a lot in this article, so I'm curious about some of your thoughts on this book and what it might mean.
Okay, so it's kind of a big question.
Right.
It's a fairly good sized book to sort of narrow down to a few passages, but I feel like, well, I'll just tell, like, the general story is, there's this guy, his name is Llewellyn Drury, and he comes across this letter that says, you are supposed to infiltrate this secret society and publish a book about all of their secrets. And so I take that back. It's not Llewellyn Drury that does that. He comes into contact with a man who tells him this is his story, and never reveals the location, never reveals his name. But the story is definitely the story of William Morgan. And William Morgan wrote a book on Freemasonry in the year that he disappeared in 1825,
Right.
called Illustrations of Masonry, which is really a difficult read if you've ever looked into it. It's basically like minutes of a meeting.
Most anything dealing with Freemasonry is a difficult read.
Yeah, I guess my point is, it's not a narrative book. Like, it is just, this is what happens in these lodges in 1825. Excuse me. So this guy's story is very similar to William Morgan, except leading up to William Morgan's disappearance in the real world and the real timeline, he doesn't disappear in the same way. He's not murdered. He's actually whisked away to Kentucky, where he finds an entrance to the hollow earth with this guide who has taken him from Batavia, New York to Kentucky. And he gets handed off to another guide who is a sightless, pale skinned, wet humanoid figure that guides him on his journey to the inner earth, and he learns these lessons about humanity. And he comes back and he tells the story to Llewellyn and Drury, who agrees that in 30 years he will publish the story. When 30 years is up, he doesn't publish the story. Instead, he enlists John Uri Lloyd to publish the story. If you believe the narrative of the book, that's how it happened. The alternate is John Uri Lloyd just wrote this book, with a weird, like, fourth person perspective on the narrative. So it's all being relayed to Llewellyn and Drury from I Am the Man, and John Uri Lloyd, who has nothing to do with it except publishes it, is credited for it.
This was published in 1895, correct? You said?
Yes.
So one of the things that was pretty popular back then, and the most famous of these is actually Dracula. Is you're making it, because Dracula is like a series of letters. If you read it, right, it's a series of these different letters, dealing with each character's association or experiences with Dracula. That's how Bram Stoker makes it. And this seems very similar in that, I have this manuscript that I was given, and I from this other guy this other guy told him not to give it for 30 years. That was kind of a common literary motif of that time period.
And another commonality is John Uri Lloyd lived in Cincinnati, and in Cincinnati we have a lot of Hollow Earth talk. I don't remember the guy's name. There's a whole monument there to this Hollow Earth story perpetrator, right? And you had Journey to the Center of the Earth came out like around this time, I think. Like it was becoming sort of a genre, like the center of the earth, the inner earth, the Hollow Earth,
right?
But the thing about John Uri Lloyd is he's a pharmacist. He is a self-taught pharmacist. He didn't have a degree. He became one of the most well-known pharmacy companies. He and his brothers, at the time, that was their shtick. So, and he was in the alternative medicine a little bit, which I think represents a lot of the fungus and the mushrooms that are in the Hollow Earth in the illustrations by J. Augustus Knapp in Etidorpha. But it's weird that this pharmacist, this is his first book. It's weird that he would write about this. Really weird.
Yeah, Wikipedia says that since Lloyd was a pharmacologist, his novel has provoked speculation that drug use contributed to his fantastic and visionary nature. Substances from marijuana and opium to nightshade, henbane, Jimson weed, and psilocybin mushrooms have been suggested as possibilities, although no real evidence on the matter is available.
Yeah. I've never found anything that said he was dipping into his own stash. You know what I mean? and the illustrations, definitely he didn't do those. And
sure,
definitely, mushroom is a common theme. They survive off of mushrooms in the Hollow Earth, apparently. And
oh, really?
That all came. Yeah. They provide all of the nutrients. Yeah. So definitely see where that point of view comes from. And I don't dismiss it, but I do think it's, without any basis, really.
Well, when you're dealing with the hallucinogens, you're dealing with the altered state of consciousness. And I mean, the Hollow Earth or the fairy realm or any of these type of places, that I think could be synonymous with whatever altered state that you're in. Now, I don't think that means that you are it's any less real.
Sure.
Because if you mentioned Josh earlier, I mean, he talks a lot about this. And he has also talked a lot about that association between the fairy realm and altered states, whether it's brought on by drugs or whatever. So these are real experiences these people are having. I just, I think that it's a synonym or I guess a for the for that experience, for that altered stage experience, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And it goes back, like I said earlier, about the non-physical aspect of these encounters and these trips to Venus and,
Right.
like, which is the Venus being what it became in, from the 50s to the 70s, really, with these contactee things. It's weird. Venus and Aphrodite are, like the correspondences for each other in different mythologies. And Etidorpha is Aphrodite backwards. And this is
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It is that.
Trendsetter. John Hury Lloyd, trendsetter.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, if you put this in a different context, if you were to take Etidorpha and you were to put it in the 1950s or the 1960s, even, this would be a contactee experience.
100%.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. And it's cool that way. It's kind of like the grandpappy of the Venusian contactee experience.
Now, what is the connection? I mean, you mentioned William Morgan. There seems to be a connection to masonry here. I mean, was John Uri Ward a Mason?
I don't think he was. I could be wrong on that. And to be honest with you, I never even checked, just because it's obviously the William Morgan story, and the fact John Uri Lloyd's mother lived 45 minutes away from the site of William Morgan's kidnapping. She was like 2 years old whenever he was kidnapped. She grew up with that story her whole life.
Sure.
And there's no way she didn't pass that story on to him. So if we just assume he wrote this book and it's entirely made up, like, he definitely lifted the William Morgan story, because the disappearance of I Am the Man and the disappearance of William Morgan are exactly the same. They never say where, but they describe where, and it's obviously Batavia, New York. So definitely think there's a possibility of Freemasonry with John Uri Lloyd. He seems like the type of cat, a little odd, into power a little bit. Like, he has this huge pharmaceutical company. Like, he makes all these alternative medicines, and obviously has an interest in sci-fi and the occult. Writing this, there's a lot of occult type thinking in Etidorpha, for sure. William Morgan, of course, like, we can briefly cover that. Like, he infiltrates the Freemasons and on lies, basically saying that he's this high-ranking Mason in Canada, thinking no one's ever going to check it out. And he tries to get into all these lodges. When he gets turned down, he writes this book. And if you believe Etidorpha, he writes the book because he receives a letter saying, this is what you need to do. This is your journey now. And in real life, it was, obviously much less dramatic. It was, I got turned down, so screw them, I'm going to expose everything I know. And even at that, taking that at face value, like, how much did he really know? Like, how true is that book that he put out? How true is Illustrations of Masonry? Because he wasn't officially a Mason. I mean, there's no proof that he was. He had tried to be several places, and it always seemed to not work in his favor. But there are more ties with the backstory and these side stories with the Masons. For example, the house that I had the lucid dream and that I found in real life, 2 buildings away, is a historic Freemason hall in Smithland, Kentucky. And that was weird as well. And when you consider Crowley coming through America, collecting all these Masonic rituals and these ceremonies, him being in that area where there's a historic Freemason hall was also pretty weird too, I thought. And there's a lot of stuff with William Morgan that I didn't know about. For example, after his disappearance, his wife marries a Mormon, moves to Missouri, and then marries Joseph Smith. Yeah. And Joseph Smith had become a Mason. His father was a Mason in New York. His brother was a Mason in New York. They were like really close by to William Morgan. It's possible when the Masons abducted William Morgan that Joseph Smith's dad was one of them, or even his older brother. And then his wife, his widow, turns around and marries Joseph Smith. It's really bizarre. It's like this retro caused like crime of passion, if William Morgan had never been taken out and she had never been made a widow, then she never would have married Joseph Smith. So retro causality. Dad, go kidnap that dude. I gotta marry this chick.
It's there's a lot going on at the same time there, I think. And Mormonism is definitely influenced by Freemasonry.
Oh, sure.
Even down to like, the sacred garments and these type of things, and the construction of the temple and this and all that. And there's also the treasure hunting aspect, which, is something that Joseph Smith did as well. That's not necessarily part of Masonry, but it seems to be associated with Masonry in some ways. I don't know exactly how, but because the Bell Witch story, and I've said this before too, that here in Tennessee, the Bell Witch story, as it's written down later on in the 19th century, is some people have looked at that and said that there's a Masonic allegory to the Bell Witch story as well.
Yeah.
And there's also treasure hunting elements in that story too, because some of the Bell sons, John Bell's sons, are digging into an Indian mound, which supposedly releases the spirit, the Bell Witch. Yeah. And that they are actually looking for buried treasure. So there's that too. So you got several things, I think, just going on at the same time there in upstate New York, which at the time is known as the burned over district because of just the pure amount of religious fervor, speculation. And you've also have the Fox sisters that are happening around around like the late 1840s. So it's about 20 years later than William Morgan, but it's all happening in that same area. So, Mormonism comes from that area. This really this anti-Masonry movement comes from that area, which is actually the third political party in the United States was actually the anti-Mason party.
And that's because of William Morgan's unfortunate series of events.
Yeah, it comes from what happens with William Morgan, whatever happened with William Morgan.
Yeah.
And there's also the spiritualism is going to start up there, much later than that. So yeah, it's just the religious fervor and the religiosity of that area was pretty much like what Southern California is today with the New Age. That is what that area was at the time of the 19th century. It was roughly equivalent in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Something that I found that was really interesting. Had you heard about, during this time of the anti-Masonic movement, about the American Hotel in Livingston County, New York, which is right between where William Morgan is abducted and where he was taken to trial? This American Hotel becomes the host of the last Livingston County Lodge. And these remaining lodge members are meeting up in this hotel for their meetings under secret because they don't want to be like harassed and killed and whatever, because it got really heated. They start noticing the articles of their clothing, like their jackets and things, are coming up missing at these meetings. And after months of this happening, one night they meet up and all the clothing that had been missing has been returned. So they take it. And it comes to that the clothing had all been infected with smallpox, and almost every Mason at that meeting contracted smallpox. Like, that is how insane this anti-Masonic movement was. Like, people were stealing their clothes and infecting them with smallpox to kill them off. Like, it was heated. And it's really weird that Livingston County, New York is the setting for that. And it's right where William Morgan's from, or where he's living when he's abducted. And then Smithland comes up in Etidorpha, which is in Livingston County, Kentucky. So it's another one of those weird sinks in this book. Like, if it's made up, there's things that support that. Like, he has all these cool connections that he makes and writes a story. But if it's not, it's just a real synchronicity. That's even stranger.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is always that kind of thing that's floating around in the ether, right?
Yeah, yeah. You just pick up on channels,
Yeah, yeah,
static noise.
yeah. I'm curious about this whole thing about Crowley and his family. I've heard Nathan mention this before.
Sure.
What specific family is he going to see in Kentucky?
No problem. I got this covered.
All right, good.
For sure.
Because I am curious about this. If you've read Empire of the Will, Walter Bosley's book, you do know that around the time of the 19 teens, Crowley is traversing the United States. So,
So Crowley's mother's grandfather had a son from a previous marriage, which would make this gentleman her uncle and Aleister Crowley's great uncle. His name's William Bishop. He's born in Somerset, UK, moves to America and marries Mary Martin of Golconda, Illinois, which is just across the Ohio, the southern tip of Illinois. They end up moving to northern Livingston County, raise a family after several failed attempts. I think they had 3 infants that passed away early. And then they did have a few children. So this is Crowley's great uncle and his children that, form this family unit there in Livingston County. One of the sons, William David Bishop, becomes elected sheriff 2 terms of Livingston County. And he was a U.S. deputy marshal at the time of his death. So this would have been 1905 and 1913, around the time Crowley would have been coming through. So it would have been his great uncle's son and other siblings that he would have been meeting up with. I've been to the cemetery where they're buried. It'll be in the documentary. It's a really isolated, scary place to get to because there's nothing around for miles. There's no cell phone reception. Like it's a little haunting to be there.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So there is a speculation that Crowley may have visited these people, that he may have visited his relatives there. Yeah.
His mother for sure did. I don't remember. I think the book is like Aleister Crowley in America, something. His mother for sure did. After it was like 1904, I think.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the Knights of the Golden Circle.
All right. So
this
is something I had no knowledge of at all, the Knights of the Golden Circle, until I started working on this.
Yeah.
I get this comment on my website to one of my episodes from season 1. This guy leaves a comment. He says, "This is really interesting." This was my first public talking about my story and that I was working on this documentary. He said, "I live in the area. Whenever I was a kid, I visited these stone stairs that led down to this wall, and there was all these ancient carvings on this wall. And I tried to reach back out to him, couldn't get a hold of him, couldn't find him. Like maybe he's using a fake name, maybe this is just completely fake, whatever." Well, eventually I find the guy on Facebook and I reach out to him, and we talked for 3 hours on Facebook Messenger. And one of the last things that he talks about, we're talking about all the local history and the stairs and all this stuff. One of the last things he tells me is, when you come down here and you start poking around, be careful. And I said, well, like snakes or what? He's like, well, in the springtime, there's a snake problem. But he said, I found this lapel pin last year and I took a picture of it, posted it on our local Facebook, and asked if anybody knew what it was from. And 3 days later, these dudes show up at his house and they tell him not to be talking about what he doesn't know about, and that it is a lapel pin from the Knights of the Golden Circle. And he needed to stop talking about it immediately. And they were not threatening, but they were intimidating, I guess. And they leave. And that's when he ghosted me. I don't know if he thought maybe I was trying to con him into telling me so that I could come back and kill him, like if I'm a Knights of the Golden Circle representative in modern day. I don't know, because I felt like we had a really good conversation. And so I think maybe he just got freaked out and thought I was part of the Knights of the Golden Circle. But later on, I would say early fall last year, I found out that there is an old Knights of the Golden Circle meeting place in Shawnee Forest. And it's part of the trail system now, near Garden of the Gods. I went there. It's this amphitheater bluff, really. It's like 3/4 of the way around. There's a natural stone arch that leads into it on one direction and like a really narrow path on another. So if they really did meet there at the time, it would have been really hard to just stumble upon. Like if you're out there in that area, there's no roads there, there's no trails there at the time. This is forest, deep forest. It's hard enough to really find now. Like finding it back then would be insane. So it'd be a great place to have a secret meeting, for sure. And you'd have a lookout in 2 spots. If someone's coming, you've got plenty of time to get out of there or hide or prepare to kill them or whatever it is that they want to do. But that's how the Knights of the Golden Circle fit to my specific story.
Wow. Okay. So the Knights of the Golden Circle, I had heard of them before. First exposure to this probably was Jim Marrs' Rules by Secrecy. If you're familiar with Jim Marrs in that book.
I am now. I wasn't at the time.
Yeah. They're not very well known. Now they were actually pre-Civil War.
Yeah.
And kind of surprising to hear. Well, no, actually, I'm going to take that back. That because the Southern Illinois, Southern Indiana, those areas were kind of more oriented toward the South in some ways than to the even though they were part of the northern states. But the Knights of the Golden Circle, what they wanted to do, their goal was to create this, of course, for the South to leave the United States. That was the first thing. But then they wanted to take over Mexico, and they wanted to take over Central America. And the idea was to eventually link up with like Brazil. And you would have, which still had slavery at the time as well. Yeah. So you would have this huge slaveholding empire that would stretch pretty much from North America into South America. That was their goal. I'm sure you know this now.
Yeah.
But just, for the listeners so that they know. Yeah. This, of course, did not happen. And when the Confederacy was defeated, so was some of the aims of the Knights of the Golden Circle. And it's been speculated that people like, Albert Pike and John Wilkes Booth and these type of people, that they were actually part of the Knights of the Golden Circle.
Yeah. Jesse James.
So like Jesse James is another one. Some of these, and there's actually a group in Brazil called the Confederados, that are actually people that left the former Confederacy and went to Brazil because I guess they felt like their way of life would be better respected down there. And they are actually still a small group in Brazil. But you have guys like, alleged members, what Wikipedia says,
Yeah.
Jefferson Davis, of course, sure. Nathan Bedford Forrest, John Wilkes Booth, Jesse James. Now, what's not as well known is people like, John Surratt, Samuel Mudd. These were people that were connected with the Lincoln assassination. What I'm interested in this, because I've always heard that they're gone. Okay, that there's that they were, but I think that maybe because you have such a right-wing upsurge now, And we do have here in Tennessee an organization called League of the South that is neo-Confederate, white supremacist. This organ, so it's not surprising to me that you might have some kind of little revival movement going on somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when it started, it was an offshoot of the Copperheads, right? Like these guys that wanted to take this even more serious and really do something about what they believed in, which is, not agreeing with their principles whatsoever. And not trying to like give them like a spotlight. Yeah, these guys fought for what they believed in. But and those types of mentalities and those mindsets evolve over time. And I definitely think that, I mean, based on what the one guy who would have no reason to make that story up and tell me, I think we kind of led into that because we were talking about some of the outlaws, in the 1800s that were in the Livingston County area. There's a really famous outlaw cave on the Ohio River on the Illinois side called Caven Rock, where these outlaws would hide and ambush these passersby on the river. There were a lot of river pirates back then, and that cave was a huge place for that. Eventually, it was even opened up as like a gambling hall and like a bar for these people. So I think that's how we kind of got into it, is directly across the river, really. But when he told me that, and I didn't know jack about the Knights of the Golden Circle. It wasn't something I'd heard of Jesse James, and all this, but I didn't know anything about it. And now going back and looking, there's definitely a lot of those ideas that have carried over in this extreme right, even a little bit into the QAnon stuff, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say so, very probably. Whether there's, because I mean, according to the Book of Knowledge here, that they were gone by 1863 or they were dissolved. Now, could there have been a small group that maybe styled themselves Knights of the Golden Circle and they exist to this day? I mean, it's entirely possible. I would say that it's more just it's probably a newer incorporation.
Oh, sure.
And who knows how many people it actually is. You said that he seemed pretty scared, and like they had threatened him, and
yeah.
But they fit in a little bit with the documentary as well.
Well, just because of finding out that they had this meeting place in the Shawnee Forest, and some of the documentary is going to focus on Southern Illinois and some of the places in the Shawnee Forest. I thought it was very strange that it would come up, and I didn't know that this place existed either. And I'd been in Shawnee Forest all my life. I'd never even heard of this Knights of the Golden Circle Trail, and that it led to this mystery meeting place. So when I came down to Nashville for Strange Realities, I stopped and on my way down, and I went and filmed the location. And I actually got a rock for Nathan and a rock for Kyle from there, just so they could have them for, Kyle for the museum and Nathan because he was talking a lot about the Knights of the Golden Circle at the time with in our conversation. So
what was Nathan's interest in this? What was he?
I think a lot of it is,
how did they see they came up in his stuff too.
I think a lot of it's the connections to some of the players to Somerset.
Mm-hmm.
Jesse James, I think, is featured and actually the whole last episode that just came out was kind of focused on it. I think it was just that, he was coming into discovering that stuff and deciding to put it in the show. And I'm a member of the Liminal Lodge, their Patreon group, and their live streams. A lot of what's coming out in season 2, we've already all covered months and months ago.
Mhm.
So, and again, you're asking me to step into the mind of Nathan Isaac, and that is
Oh, well, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah.
physically, mentally, emotionally not going to
Well,
happen.
yeah, I'll have to ask him. No, when we were there, I mean, we did stop by that little spring,
Yeah.
the town spring. I'm sure they've shown you that, and then that's an interesting place. And I forgot the guy's name that who it was, but
C.R. Cundiff.
C.R. Cundiff, yeah. And what it reminded me of was the Georgia Guidestones. Okay, I don't know if you've, I'm sure you've heard of it, but I don't know if you've ever been down there. I've been down there a couple, 2 or 3 times. And you know, Dr. Future, a good friend of the show, he did pretty much, he solved the case of the Georgia Guidestones and who RC Christian was, and nobody seems to care, which just really burns me up because they still want it to be Ted Turner or the Illuminati so they can make TV shows about it. But the truth is that it was a doctor in Iowa, some basically American fascist, you know, racist, white supremacist. There was a lot of these kind of views, even though he probably wouldn't style himself that. But Cundiff seemed to be the same style to me.
Yeah. And what's really weird about that is like they're wanting to build this super conservative college right there now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like just perpetuating this mindset, right? Like over the centuries at this point.
Right. Yeah. It's going to literally be built right on top of this like old town springs, even though there actually isn't a town spring there. But yeah, it seems like there's a lot of this is just, I think, an undercurrent of kind of like a basic American fascism, white supremacy, these type of things. This is always gone on, and unfortunately it's probably going to continue to go on. But especially I think when like powerful people, weird eccentric people with money like Cundiff and the guy who was RC Christian, are going to build these odd things, but it's also indicative of this kind of fascist, racist undercurrent.
Yeah,
and I think that's part of where Nathan is going in Pennyroyal as well too. So
yeah, for sure. Like I said, we're privy in the Patreon group for knowing a lot of what, at least the surface of what some of these things are they're going to be in season 2.
Yeah,
but it's always amazing to see how he connects things and the stories that he uncovers. You know, all of them, they all are really great at just taking these stories and connecting the dots and making it all coherent somehow. It's incredible.
Well, what's the timeline on the documentary? When you think you're going to have it out?
So when I initially started the project, I mistakenly thought to myself, well, how hard could it be to make a documentary by yourself for no money? And it turns out it's incredibly hard. I've been down to Kentucky several times to film, and it's just a matter of time for me now and time management to sit down and film my talking head parts. So that's really where I'm at. And if I were able to stop doing the show and stop going to work, I could have it done in like a month. But unfortunately, that's not the case. I still have my regular life. You know, I'm a dad. I've got regular person problems, and and I work full time. So this is like in my spare time while I'm also doing the podcast, which editing podcasts, as you know, I'm sure it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of, I fit it in when I can. And I had out before the end of the year, and that did not happen, not anywhere close. It would be by year.
It'll be out by the end of the year. Oh, sorry, it cut out there a little bit.
That's my new operating goal. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Well, congratulations. I mean, that's definitely a labor of love. I'm glad to see people doing those type of things. Yeah. So other than that, what's next for you with Paranormal Patio?
Oh man, we're rocking and rolling into the third season. The last interview that I recorded was with Steven Snyder. Got to talk with him a lot in Somerset, and I gave him a ride back to the hotel the night of the party. And turns out we were like hotel room neighbors. Like his was right next to mine. So it was pretty crazy, pretty wild. I actually got him to tell some like personal paranormal stories, which is
Oh,
fascinating.
really?
Yeah, so you have to look forward to that one. That'll be out I think in a couple of weeks. This week there's another one that'll come out this week, and then it'll be 2 weeks after that. So
Okay, yeah. Well, Steven, he's a great friend, Recluse. He's
yeah,
a great friend of the show, has been part of the conference and all
yeah.
that. And that's great. Any questions for me? I would think because I'm sure that you're a listener of Conspirinormal.
Oh, sure, absolutely. And you guys do such a great job too, by the way.
Thank
The
you.
variety of topics and guests that you have, the huge aspirations of putting on a conference during a pandemic and successfully pulling it off. I know that it was stressful. I could tell just from
Yeah.
from being around, the people in charge. Like you guys were stressed out. Some things didn't happen the way you wanted them to happen. Some things didn't work. Some people couldn't show up, but it was a great experience. I really cannot stress enough how everyone should try to attend the next one in person, because in between all the speakers, there is all of these like-minded individuals huddled behind the building and telling personal stories and talking about research and talking about ideas. And it's just as fascinating to be out there into that as it is to sit and listen to them with their presentations, right? If you can make it to one, take it from me, definitely go. Highly recommended. The last one was a lot of fun. And I imagine hopefully this year there'll be a little more people there, it seems like we're kind of maybe potentially getting out of the pandemic state, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, now we got to worry about Russia. So, so
Well, I don't think they're going to be shutting down paranormal conferences.
let's hope,
we'll
okay. let's hope not. Yeah. But thank
so
you
yeah,
for that.
100% big supporter of you guys. I will most likely, unless some unforeseen circumstance comes up, I'll be back in Nashville for the next one for sure. Questions for you, man. How did you start this podcast journey?
Well, for me, it became just like getting really back into looking at the paranormal again when I was in my 20s. And like I said before, like about the Ghost Hunters show and all that. And one, I worked a lot of nights. I still work a lot of nights. And back then I would listen to the radio and I listened to Coast to Coast. And there were these guys that they were talking to from Detroit called Ghostly Talk. And I, wanted to listen to something other than Coast to Coast because I didn't want to pay for the free subscription, which I did later. But at the time, I went ahead and was like, well, I can listen to this in my car, load it on my iPod, all this type of thing. I don't have to be, just be holding to the radio. So I started listening to that, and that led me to other shows. And eventually, I got, met Dr. Future in about 2010. He was doing Future Quake. I became a fan of that show. And from 2010 to 2012, wanted to do my own podcast. Well, he finally hung it up, and I decided, well, I just try to pick up a little bit where he left off. Not that I could ever match the excellent Future Quake show, but and he's still a really good friend of mine to this day. So that was the reason, I got into it. And later on, the next step was really doing the conference because I a good friend of mine, Guy Malone, over in Roswell, New Mexico. He put on his own conference for the 70th anniversary of whatever happened in Roswell in 2017. Myself and Rob, who was my co-host and producer at the time, we went out there and real inspired to do something for myself. I had, and I wanted to try to do something in 2016. But had some life changes and some things happen. So really 2019 was really like the sweet spot where I could actually get it done. And, Rob, that venue that we use, SIR, it's a perfect place. Rob worked there. He worked there at the time, and it was just, was able to get a discount on it. And, it was just the perfect thing to do. And so we actually did it. And that year, even though it was filmed and it actually is online now, we didn't stream online. And because of the pandemic in 2020, obviously we decided we stream online. So we did a purely online Strange Realities that year, which we actually learned. That was actually a big learning process. And I think we were able to take what we had learned from 2020 and do this quote unquote hybrid event in 2021 that you were at. And next year, this year for 2022, which by the way, we will say that October 14th through the 16th is what it's going to be this year. We're going to be, hopefully everyone will be at the venue speaking, and we're going to be still streaming it live. So people will still have that option. But I think now, with the pandemic ending and once we get past the world crisis that we're in, I think, thanks, Putin. We can all get together in October for the Strange Realities 2022. So we already got, a good lineup. Like I said, Recluse, who you mentioned, Nathan is coming back. John Tenney will be coming back this year. Josh Cutchin, Tim Banal, quite a few new faces that we're going to have. Kiki is going to make it this year, come hell or high water.
Better. Kiki's great, by the way.
She is. We just did, and I'll plug this, and I guess because this will probably go up on your feed as well. We just did our kind of paranormal speaker series, I guess is what we're calling it. It's called Strange Realities, online events. And we're going to be it's kind of an outgrowth of something that we were doing for our Patreon, which was our Meeting of the Mystic Crew. This is something that's for our $10 and above Patreons, but every month we're having a speaker. And I'll go ahead and mention, I was going to mention this anyway at the end of the show, but the next one is coming up March 25th. We did the Kiki's on February 25th with David Metcalf. And he will actually he sent me the title, and this is a scoop for you, Jason.
Oh man.
The title is called Star Children and Psychic Futures. So all right, guys, tune in for that. Tickets will go on sale for that pretty soon. So there's two ways to do that. You can either become a $10 Patreon, which is actually what we prefer because it's actually easier for you and for us. But there's also going to be an online ticket sold through Eventbrite as well. So we got a lot. We got a lot going on. We're actually also doing something called Paranoid Styles, which is where Surfiel and I just speak about kind of the history of conspiracy theory and some of our ideas of how it's gotten so crazy. And that's almost like its own podcast within a podcast. We did one of those last month, and hopefully here soon we'll be doing another one pretty soon. But yeah, it's definitely a labor of love, man. I mean, gotta, sure. It's something to keep up with and fill your day. I'm sure you can relate on that. So
overwhelming sometimes, right? But you keep doing it. Would you say you get more out of like talking to these people and hearing their stories for yourself or for putting it out there for everyone else. Like it's okay to be a little selfish. Like I feel like I do this because I get to talk to these interesting people to tell me interesting things. Sharing it with the rest of the world is just kind of like a bonus.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both for me. Whenever I started Conspirinormal in 2012, I had gone to a lot of paranormal conferences, okay, and I had met through that a lot of people, or I had heard a lot of people that were on other radio shows, and either I met those people or I just reached out to them, and I knew who I wanted to have on, and I was always like, when you're listening to a show and you're like, well, I would have loved to ask another question than what I'd love to talk to them about this subject. I'd love to get their thoughts on another aspect of it. That was kind of my thought process when I started Conspirinormal. Was I want to talk to these people, but also at the same time, having that ability to, like, because I was kind of, touched by what other people did and inspired by what other people did. And I was that kid. Well, I wasn't a kid. I was in my 20s, but, I was that kid that, lay in my bed and I'd listen to podcasts to go to sleep, and listen to these shows. There was one called World of the Unexplained that I listened to all the time. I just, go to sleep listening to it. And I wanted to kind of give that back to somebody else that might, there's probably somebody that listens to Conspirinormal or to the Paranormal Patio that, that does that now, that is inspired by what we're doing. And it's just, I think it's a chain effect, it's like pass it on, start your own. And when I started, I don't think there was as many podcasts. Definitely the word was there by then, but now it's become easier and easier to do what we're doing. And so I think that chain can continue and keep going on to where when I stop, whenever that is going to be, somebody else can take up that mantle, and so it's a little bit of both. There is a kind of like a selfish motive, but there is also like I want to give back, as well. Sure. So
I wasn't trying to downplay the making it for everybody else. Obviously, if I just want to talk to these people, I would never put out the episodes. I would just call people and be like, hey, we're doing this podcast interview. I'm just gonna keep it for myself though.
Right. But it's still cool to do. And the other thing is, and I'm sure you've definitely experienced this, is that the more you have these people on, the more that you become friends with them, and the more you gain relationships with them. And that's how I was able to build the conferences, is because I already had relationships with these people. And so by having someone on, it wasn't like I just, out of the blue said, although I probably could, it was like I'd have somebody on Conspirinormal first, and then I would see how they were. And then I go, well, I like what this person is saying. Let's have them for the conference. And they already know me from the podcast. So,
for sure.
And one thing we're doing with Strange Realities, or at least we're attempting to, is that we're trying to build this up as like its own kind of like little company, its own kind of production aspect of it, so that Conspirinormal, maybe people might get confused as like, well, are you Strange Realities or you Conspirinormal? Really, Conspirinormal is part of Strange Realities now. What we're doing, is all the same. So
do you struggle with that at all? Like, I know I'm asking just like podcaster questions and not experience questions, but do you struggle with it becoming more and more of a job versus a hobby? Like, do you struggle with the motivation sometimes?
Sure. I think anybody does.
I just wanted to make sure, I don't talk about podcasting really that much on my show or with anybody that I have on my show. I've interviewed a dozen podcasters, but like, I'm curious, someone at your scale versus my own. Like I know how like my problems are, and my lack of motivation sometimes. And the more that I've added to it and made it so that there are more expectations and there's more pressure, it's harder to keep it up and to keep going every day.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really curious just about like how that is for you at your level. You know what I mean? I'm not even in the minor leagues. I consider yours as like, you're like one of the major league brands, right? So from my perspective, and I can only imagine the immense pressure of putting on these giant events and all these different aspects of it. Like, I don't know how I'd handle it, to be honest.
Well, I mean, yeah, I appreciate that. I don't necessarily see myself as like the big famous guy, but but I do appreciate that. Yeah, sometimes, yeah, it can seem to be like more like a job than a hobby. I'll put it that way. And there are those times that you're like, oh man, I don't really want to do this tonight. I don't want to, I don't want to deal with this, but I gotta. And it's in those moments that you're just like, has this become a job? Has this become more of a drudgery type of thing? Is it fun anymore? And I think, Sergio and I, we've talked a little bit about some of this, and, you don't want to suffer too much for what you're doing, I guess.
Right.
You want it to still be fun. You want to still have that aspect. And yeah, there are definitely those times where I'll get on and I'll be like, okay, I got to get this done. Let's do this, but at the end of the interview or whatever we're doing, it's, you do reap that reward still,
Yeah.
I think a lot, and I'll be probably more honest than I should. It is this is kind of a game right now. Where you feel like, and especially I think that if you are relying on it for your entire income, I think it becomes, you do feel that pressure. See, I don't rely on this for my income.
Yeah. Maybe.
Whatever we make really goes into the pot of strange realities. And I think when you don't rely on it, it can become a little less of trying to not necessarily get one over somebody, but like trying to have hit the latest trends, do, this kind of social media pressure that people feel.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the things that, especially in the last couple of years with the pandemic, what Serfiel and I have noticed is that there are a lot of people that have basically really kind of compromised their own principles or what they feel should be right and wrong because somebody is probably giving them money and giving them funding.
Yeah.
And I won't say, I have some specific shows in mind, but I won't say who they are.
Well, it better not be mine, because I don't even put my podcast on Apple out of principle.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I remember asking you at Jarfly. I was like, "Well, is it on iTunes?" And you're like, "No, it's solely on Spotify."
No, it's everywhere but iTunes.
It's everywhere but iTunes. Yeah, but I was like, "Well, cool. It gives me an excuse to listen to a podcast on Spotify." But yeah, it's and I'm not talking about any of the other shows like Where Do the Road Go or Strange Familiars. Let me say that right now. I'm not talking about them.
Obviously.
I'm talking about some other shows that I think that have gotten funding from some rather probably suspicious sources. But yeah, that you do feel, I think, that pressure at a certain point to like, there's that performance pressure that you gotta have. And now let's just face it, I mean, the podcast thing is becoming inundated. Everybody's making their podcast, right? People, you will have podcasts like ours where we talk about serious subjects, and we do okay. We're able to my podcast sustains itself, which means that I'm able to take the money that I get and pay for the things that I use to make the show. But there's other shows out there that, well, they'll just talk about nonsense for 2 hours, and they've got a huge following and a huge Patreon support, and stuff like that does get frustrating, but I think that you really just got to be, what you really have to do, and what I've had to do is to say, well, I'm just going to worry about what I want, what I'm doing. I'm not going to worry about what somebody else is doing. And I think that's really the key. And I think that, like, if you're trying to have some kind of podcast fame or some kind of paranormal fame, good luck.
No kidding. Yeah.
Because honestly, unless you are able to get on television, then people see you, then people recognize you, then people know who you are, because most people don't want to seek out what is unfamiliar. Most people want to see a familiar face. That still is, that box in our house is still pretty powerful. So, that's why I'm glad that there are shows like yours and mine that are on a smaller level, and we're doing more of a grassroots type of thing. And that's, I think, the way that it probably should be. But there are podcasts, a lot of it I think is about luck. I mean, there are podcasts that get mentioned on other larger podcasts, and then all of a sudden their listenership goes up. So you never know what could actually happen at a certain time.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm counting on right now. That's the only reason I agreed to come on your show.
So right, exactly.
I've always taken the approach of, this is for me first, because I've spent so much of my time ignoring this fascination, so it's selfish. But I feel like I do the best possible job that I can with production for everyone else, so that it's easy to listen to and it sounds decent. And I try to get like a lot of different type of stories. Like, I collect stories. That's what it's evolved into. I'm just story collecting at this point, and that's really fun.
That's a good service.
Yeah. And I don't care if 1 million people listen to me this year. I don't care if 1,000 people listen to me this year, because like you, I'm self-sufficient in this. It takes care of itself. I just have to put the time in, and I really look forward to talking to every different guest that I have. I just hate going back and editing it and working with my perfection complex to be okay with putting that out, but I think that comes through, and it's for me, it's just about the fun of the story. And I don't care, if I cared that much, I would be on Apple and I'd have double the listeners that I have now, and I don't care.
I think that we're going to find that podcasting has a very good documentary purpose. And what I mean by that is, especially in the field that we are in, where you have these older people that have been doing this for a very long time, and preserving their voices and their experiences are very, very important.
Yeah,
that's something that Surfiel and I decided, and myself and Surfiel, we decided that that's something we really wanted to do. Because Tim Beckley is a great example. I mean, you look at all the experiences that man has had. I was very privileged to have had Tim on my show at least 2 times, and he's gone.
Yeah.
So someone can go back and they can hear his voice and hear his experiences. Because a lot of these guys and ladies are not going to be with us very much longer. So, Sergio likens it to like the folk recordings that were done by the New Deal, that was funded by the New Deal, rather, back in the 1930s, where they went and talked to ex-slaves, they went and talked to, Civil War veterans, all these people that were going to be gone soon, and to preserve their memory. And so it's very much in that same vein, except in the fact that we're talking about UFOs or Bigfoot or, the ghosts, the more paranormal experiences. There's people with a lifetime of research experiences that are just invaluable. And you want those people to be documented. So podcasting, and especially someone that's into history as I am, and that's very important.
Yeah, for sure. Totally agree.
Yeah. So like your friend that had the Bigfoot experience, you've got that recorded. It's on the internet. I mean, that's a good example of that. And then just people's personal experiences are important as well.
For sure. And when you can get to like a story that has been told, third hand, fourth hand for years, and you get to the source, and you get the actual, honest story from the person who lived it, and you preserve that little piece, then it's there.
Yeah.
I don't know what the internet's going to look like in 50 years, but I know that it'll probably be just as easy to find these stories through our podcasts, as it is now, at least as easy, if not easier. Unless, they make us all get podcasting licenses and we all quit.
you never know. You never know what could happen.
Yeah, who knows, man? Regulation. But no, it's refreshing to me to hear you talk about this stuff, because we share the exact same viewpoints on it. I feel like, with the actual act of podcasting, it makes me feel good that, someone whose content I respect shares the exact same problems and concerns and looks forward to the same things, that I do. So Thank you. That makes me feel good.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I'm glad to talk about it, because it's not something that I talk about on the show really at all, because I don't want it to seem like, that I seem discouraged. That's not what it is. But people, no,
not at all.
People do need to understand. I mean, as podcasters, we make a ton of content for people to devour. There's so much information out there, and I think, really seriously, support your podcast, my podcast, people, just, even if it's like $1, just give us something to help with that, because, that's a lot of time and it is a lot of effort. I mean, I could be watching The Simpsons or something, but really it's like, to me, it's like, that's not really, I've got plenty of time to do that stuff. I take one night out of my week to do this. And, I mean, it's valuable, and I'm glad people appreciate it in whatever form that they can. But money is nice.
Sure. I don't really even care about the money. Just share my episode on social media or something, so that somebody else can find, that's really all I ask. I'm doing fine financially. I'm okay, and if I depended on this, if I depended on this to live, it'd be a different story. I'd be like, yeah, send me all your money. But yeah, that's not really where I'm at. But yeah, sure. If you want to throw $1 here or there, that'd be great. You can just That's about what we get out of our Patreon, and our T-shirt sales is about $1 interactions.
Well, look, I mean, we've been talking. I think we started at about 10 after the last hour. We're almost like an hour and 40 minutes, and like this is a ton of content for somebody to consume. And and also too, I mean, like, especially during the pandemic, I feel like podcasts were a godsend for a lot of people and really a lifeline for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's why I found your podcast, man. So,
hey, cool. Thank you.
Several others as well. But yours...
I've enjoyed what I've heard of the Paranormal Patio. I'm going to keep listening. So,
well, I appreciate that, man. That's awesome. I'm glad someone enjoys it.
So, where can people find the Paranormal Patio?
Sure. Well, the easiest way is paranormalpatio.com, but you can search for every podcast platform except for Apple. It's a personal decision, and you'll hear that almost every episode. I don't care. I don't care. I had someone who I've spoken to a lot on the internet that used to work for Apple that has exposed to me even more reasons why I should not put my stuff on Apple. So I'm going to continue. But yeah, you can search Spotify. It's probably the easiest place. I like Spotify a lot. And we are on Patreon, patreon.com/beyond the patio, which is just extra stuff and early access to all the episodes, monthly live stream, that sort of thing. Look forward to having you on whatever way you want to absorb our content. We collect stories and we tell weird tales and we hang out and do fun stuff like Bigfoot hunting, haunted cemeteries.
Yeah, and if we're going to do a crossover episode, which I think is what we're going to do, Conspirinormal is on every podcast platform, including Apple. Sorry. And but that we are on there. So if you've never heard Conspirinormal podcast as well, we also have a Patreon, Conspirinormal, Patreon/Conspirinormal, and we also do Strange Realities. We're doing events every month now, so online events. So check that out as well. So.
Are the online events left up after the live?
Yeah, I actually just did the video for the last one, and I just posted it on YouTube, but I'm going to put that up for the Patreon pretty soon.
In case this doesn't come out on my stream before the 25th, I just wanted to clarify that because you have the next one coming up, and if it comes out after that, I want people to still listen and watch.
Yeah, they'd have to either buy a ticket or become a Patreon, but they would be able to see it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me on, man. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you.
I like the woo-woo stuff and the weirdo stuff and the conspiracy stuff, but I also liked, I got a lot of the conversation just talking to you about what we do, Yeah.
All right. Well, Gus, thank you so much. And we will be back next week with David Metcalf on Conspirinormal.
Looking forward to it.
Consider becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/Conspirinormal or leave a one-time donation at Conspirinormal.com. And please check out our YouTube channel, Conspirinormal Podcast.